My parents gave our family home to my sister, but the will said otherwise. At my parents' dinner table in Burlington, Vermont, I learned that love can turn into eviction with the slam of a fork. It happened in an instant. My mother's hand came down on her plate so hard the sound ricocheted through the dining room. Her voice followed sharp as a blade. "You have 48 hours to get your things out. This house belongs to your sister now." I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. The pasta on my plate went cold as the words sank in. My father didn't even look at me. He just kept his eyes glued to his food, shoulders heavy, as if silence could make him invisible. And Tara, my sister, who hadn't lived here in years, leaned back in her chair like royalty being crowned. She smirked. She didn't even try to hide it. I thought I'd misheard. I asked softly at first, "What?" But my mother's glare cut deeper. "You've been here long enough. It's time to move on. This house is Tara's. Start packing." The house? The walls I'd painted beige after pulling double shifts. The floorboards I'd sanded and stained when they started warping. The creaky stairs I'd fixed late one night so Dad wouldn't trip on them anymore. The house I had saved when the bank threatened foreclosure 5 years ago. I remembered that day like it was burned into me. Dad at the kitchen table, head in his hands. Bills spread out like a battlefield. Mom pacing the floor, her voice sharp with panic. "We're going to lose everything." And me, 25, and terrified, draining my savings, pulling every extra hour at my software job to scrape together $80,000. I kept this roof over their heads. I thought it made us a team. Now I realized it just made me disposable. I looked at Tara. She barely knew what color the curtains were because she'd never been here to notice. She'd been living it up in California, posting photos of beaches and brunches, visiting maybe once every couple of years. Yet here she was, gifted everything in a single sentence. I opened my mouth to argue, but Dad finally spoke, his voice low, almost pleading. "Just do as your mother says, Monica." That was worse than the eviction. His loyalty wasn't with me. It never had been. I stared at both of them, the people I had believed were my safe harbor. And then at Tara, who was watching me with that smug grin that said she'd won without lifting a finger. Something broke in me. Not loudly, not with tears or shouting. It broke in silence like a glass cracking under pressure. I stood up without a word. My chair scraped across the floor. I walked to my room, closed the door, and leaned against it, heart hammering so hard it hurt. I pulled out my phone and opened a blank note. My fingers shook, but I forced them to move. I started listing everything in the house that I had paid for: the sofa, the flat-screen TV, the washer, the curtains, the rug in the living room. Every nail, every stitch of fabric, every receipt that had drained me while Tara was off sipping cocktails in Los Angeles. My list grew line by line, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. They could strip me of the house, but they couldn't erase the proof of what I'd built inside it. I whispered to myself, "You think I'll just walk away?" Wrong. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar creaks of the home I had saved. The walls felt closer, suffocating, like they were listening too. 48 hours? That's what they'd given me. But they didn't know me anymore. I wasn't the daughter who silently covered their debts and swallowed their dismissals. I wasn't the sister who let Tara's absence excuse everything. If they wanted to play cruel, I could be colder than they imagined. By the time the sun rose, my plan had already started forming in the quiet corners of my mind. I wasn't going to beg or cry. I was going to make sure they felt every nail, every dollar, every hour of my sacrifice when I left. They thought they were cutting me out, but all they'd done was light a fire. And once it started, I wasn't sure even I could control how far it would burn. The next morning, I walked through each room like I was touring a museum of my own labor. Every corner carried my fingerprints, my sweat. And yet in less than 2 days, I was supposed to vanish from it all. I paused in the living room staring at the warm beige walls. I remembered rolling that paint on myself, sweating in the summer heat with a plastic fan blowing warm air at me. Tara had never seen this color, never commented, never cared. To her, a house was just a backdrop for a photo. To me, it was every hour of overtime turned into something real. My eyes landed on the sofa, plush, gray, sturdy. It took me months to save for it. I'd eaten ramen for weeks, skipped nights out with friends just so I could buy something nice for us to sit on together. For us. And when it arrived, I had been so proud arranging pillows I'd chosen myself. Now Tara would probably sprawl across it, laughing, calling it hers. I clenched my jaw and wrote it on my list. Sofa mine. The TV mounted on the wall. The stainless steel washer humming in the basement. The curtains I'd picked to match the paint, they all went on the list. Each item was proof of the years I held this place together, while my parents leaned on me like I was their second mortgage. I remembered the darkest day when the bank threatened foreclosure. Dad sat with his face buried in his hands, Mom pacing and muttering, "We'll lose everything." I was terrified too, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I called my HR manager, begged for more shifts, drained my savings, and handed over $80,000 across 3 brutal years. Every payment was a sacrifice. But when the bank relented, when the relief lit up my parents' faces, I thought it was worth it. Or so I thought, because now I realized what that relief had really been. Not gratitude, not partnership, just expectation. They saw me not as their daughter, but as a safety net. I sank into the sofa, the same one Tara would soon claim, and whispered bitterly to myself, "You were never the heir. You were just the caretaker." And Tara, my sister, had been living in California, too busy for birthdays, too distant for emergencies. She'd call maybe twice a year, her voice all sugar and superiority. When I mentioned the mortgage once, she'd laughed. That's your thing, Monica? Your thing. I had painted repaired covered bills, replaced floorboards, mended creaky stairs, even bought Dad a new set of tires when he couldn't afford them. Tara hadn't lifted a single finger. Yet she was about to be handed everything. The betrayal wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kristen, my best friend since college, now a sharp no-nonsense lawyer. When she answered, her voice was brisk, grounding me instantly. What happened? I poured it all out, the slammed fork, the 48-hour ultimatum, the quiet nod from my father, the smug grin from Tara. She was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you have any paperwork? Anything from your grandfather?" The mention of him hit me like a punch. Grandpa, the man who built this house, brick by brick, who sat with me on the porch, telling stories about how every nail had a reason. He'd always said, "This place will be yours, Monica." I thought it was just his way of making me feel special. Kristen's voice sharpened. "Let me check something at the county clerk's office. Give me an hour." An hour felt like forever. I paced the hallway, my chest tight. I thought about Grandpa's rough hands, the way he'd grip my shoulder and smile promising, "This place will always be safe for you." Safe. That word echoed like a cruel joke. When Kristen called back, her voice was tight with urgency. "Monica, you're not going to believe this. I found your grandfather's will. He left the house to you. You alone. Not your parents. Not Tara. Just you." My breath caught. That's impossible. They never told me." "Of course they didn't," she said coldly. "They had access, they hid it. But the will is notarized and filed. It's legally binding." I dropped onto the sofa, my whole body trembling. My parents had lied to me for years. They'd watched me bleed money and time into this house, knowing full well it was already mine. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't from grief. They were from rage. I whispered into the empty living room. You knew, and you still tried to take it away." Kristen's voice cut through the storm in my head. "Listen to me. You're not powerless. You have legal rights. We can fight this, but you need to gather everything: receipts, bank statements, photos, proof of your work. Leave nothing out." I wiped my face and grabbed a notebook. My hands were steady now. I started writing sofa, TV, washer, curtains, mortgage payments, repairs, paint. Each line was a weapon. I wasn't just listing items anymore. I was preparing for war. Kristen came over that night with a folder clutched to her chest like it was dynamite. She dropped it on my kitchen table, her eyes sharp with that mix of pity and anger only a lawyer friend can carry. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is your grandfather's will. It's ironclad. Signed, notarized, filed 3 years before he passed. And it names only you, as heir to the Burlington property." The air in the room went heavy. My stomach knotted as I flipped through the papers, the ink blurring because my eyes were wet. Grandpa's name at the bottom, his looping signature felt like a ghost reaching out across time. He'd chosen me. He'd trusted me. And my parents had buried that truth like it was trash.
I could barely whisper. They knew Kristen's jaw tightened. Of course they knew. They had access. They had a copy. They kept it hidden because it didn't fit their plan.
Her words stung, but they also pulled everything into focus. The way Mom always softened her tone on the phone with Tara. The way Dad's pride seemed reserved for her California job. The constant dismissals of my sacrifices. They weren't blind to what I'd done. They just never intended for me to keep the reward. The betrayal carved into me like ice. I thought of all the nights I'd worked until my hands cramped, the money I poured into repairs, instead of vacations, the groceries I stocked, while Mom gushed about Tara's success. And all along, they had been planning to hand her the keys while keeping me in the dark. Kristen leaned back, folding her arms. "You need to decide what you want, Monica. Do you want to fight for the house or for revenge?" I stared at the beige walls I had painted, the sofa. I had bled hours for the receipts stacked in a drawer. And for the first time, I realized they were more than furniture and drywall. They were evidence. Proof of everything I'd been denied. "I want justice," I said, my voice low, shaking. "Not just for me, for him. Because it wasn't only about me anymore. It was about Grandpa's promise. The one he whispered on the porch, his arm heavy around my shoulders. This place will always be yours." He had trusted me to protect it. And my parents had spat on his wish. I pulled open my drawers, yanking out folders stuffed with receipts, paint, hardware, appliances, utilities. Kristen helped me spread them across the table, her lawyer's eye catching every detail. "These are gold," she muttered. "We'll draft an affidavit documenting every contribution. You'll have a timeline so airtight they can't wriggle out." As we worked, my anger sharpened into clarity. I thought about Mom slamming her fork down, about Dad avoiding my eyes, about Tara smirking, like she had earned something she never touched. They thought I'd crumble. They thought I'd walk away quietly. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Still, when the work was done and Kristen left, the silence of the house pressed on me. I walked through the kitchen, my fingers brushing Grandpa's old coffee mug. Chips stained, but still standing strong just like him. Just like I wanted to be. I held it tight and whispered into the dark. "They won't erase you. They won't erase me." But another voice, quieter, crept in too. "What will you erase in the process?" Because battles don't just burn enemies. They burn everything in their path. And I knew once I lit this match, there was no going back. The next morning, Kristen texted me at 6 a.m. sharp. "Meet me at the county clerk's office. Bring every receipt." I stuffed the folders into a backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out of the house that suddenly felt less like a home and more like enemy territory. Each creak of the floorboards seemed to whisper, "They betrayed you. They used you." At the courthouse, Kristen was all business. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she guided me to a side office where a clerk stamped papers without looking up. Kristen's voice cut through the air with authority.
We're filing to enforce the will of Charles Whitman, deceased, naming Monica Whitman as sole heir. The words made my chest tighten. Sole heir. Grandpa's faith in me had a legal backbone. It was real, not a story I'd made up to comfort myself. The clerk glanced at me briefly, then slid the papers across the counter. With every stamp, the reality hardened. My parents hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had broken the law. Walking out, Kristen put a hand on my shoulder. It won't be easy. They'll fight. But this puts you in control. Control. A word I hadn't felt in years. Back at the house, I didn't wait. I pulled open drawers, opened closets, and began tagging everything that was mine. The TV, the sofa, the washer, even the curtains I'd bought to match the paint. I wrote my name on sticky notes, slapped them onto each item like a soldier marking territory. By mid-morning, I was on the phone with Green Mountain Movers. The man on the other end sounded skeptical when I asked for a rush job. You want this today? Yes, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Today, noon. When I hung up, I noticed my hands trembling, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Around 10, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Linda, our neighbor from across the street, stood holding a plate of muffins. She peered past me into the house, her brow furrowing at the sticky notes dotting the furniture. Are you moving, dear? I forced a smile. Something like that. She pressed the plate into my hands, her eyes soft with concern. Your grandfather would be proud of you. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise. Her words nearly cracked me, but I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. By noon, the moving truck pulled up. 3 men in green shirts hauled my life piece by piece out the front door. With every item that left the house looked less like mine. Yet instead of loss, I felt lighter, as though I was stripping it of the lies my parents had woven around me. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching my sofa disappear into the truck. This isn't yours anymore, I whispered to the house. Halfway through, a car screeched into the driveway. Tara! Fresh off the plane from California, dragging a suitcase behind her like she was moving in. She froze when she saw the movers carrying out the TV. What the hell is going on? I didn't move. I took what's mine. She stormed up the steps, heels clicking. Mine. Mom and Dad said this house is mine. I met her glare with one of my own. Mom and Dad lied. Grandpa didn't leave this house to them. He left it to me. And you're not taking a damn thing. Her face twisted, half disbelief, half rage. You can't just strip it bare. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Watch me. She pulled out her phone, her hand shaking, muttering into the receiver. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew who she was calling. Mom, Dad, reinforcements. But it was too late. The truck was already packed. My things were gone safe in storage. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one left defenseless. As Tara slammed her suitcase down and paced through the half-empty house, I felt it the shift. The fight had begun, but for once, I wasn't the victim. I was the one writing the rules. Tara's voice rose sharp and shrill as she paced through the gutted living room phone pressed to her ear. Mom, it's empty. She's taking everything. You better get back here now. Her suitcase sat abandoned by the stairs, clothes spilling from the zipper like she thought she was moving in permanently. The entitlement radiated off her in waves. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Watching her stomp around the house like she already owned it would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. When she hung up, her glare cut into me. They'll be back tonight. And when they get here, you're gone. I smirked. We'll see. Her face flushed. You're unbelievable. You think because you threw some money at this place you own it? You were just playing house. Mom and Dad trusted me with this family, not you. Trusted you? I shot back my voice low but steady. You didn't lift a finger while I was paying the mortgage. You didn't pick up a hammer or cover a single bill. The only thing you've done is show up with your hand out. She faltered for half a second before putting her chin up. You're just jealous. They chose me. I almost laughed. Chose you or used me until I had nothing left, then handed everything to the daughter who never cared. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't answer. She just grabbed her suitcase, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. Slamming the door so hard, the frame rattled. Silence filled the house. Heavy. Electric. I sat down on the edge of the stairs, staring at the floorboards I'd once sanded by hand. Hours crawled by. By nightfall, headlights cut across the front yard. My parents were back. The door flew open, and my mother stepped inside first, her face tight with fury. My father followed silent but stone-faced. What have you done, Monica? Mom's voice cracked like a whip. I stood slowly meeting her eyes. I took what belongs to me. She pointed at the bare living room. You stripped this house. How dare you undermine us like this? I clenched my jaw. You undermined me the second you hid Grandpa's will. He left this house to me. Not you. Not Tara. Me. Dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. We were protecting the family. No, I snapped, my chest tightening. You were protecting Tara. You let me bleed money into this place for years while you sat on the truth. You let me believe I was saving our home when really you were setting me up to be cast out. Mom scoffed. You don't understand? No, I cut her off, my voice sharp. I understand perfectly. You thought I'd stay quiet. You thought I'd accept being discarded like trash while Tara waltzed in. You miscalculated. My father's eyes narrowed. You've let bitterness poison you. You're tearing this family apart. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. I'm not tearing it apart. You did that when you betrayed me. Mom's face hardened, her tone dropping to a cold hiss. You'll regret this, Monica. Family is all you have. I took a step closer, lowering my voice until it trembled with restrained fury. No, I had family. You burned that bridge. All I have now is the truth. and the truth is on my side. The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents looked at me like I wasn't their daughter anymore, and maybe I wasn't. Maybe I'd finally stopped being their pawn. I didn't wait for their response. I grabbed my bag, walked past them, and pulled the front door shut behind me. For the first time, I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was walking away with fire in my veins, ready for whatever fight came next. The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise. Voicemails, texts, even emails, all from my parents and Tara. The messages swung wildly from guilt trips to threats. Family sticks together. You're abandoning us. You'll be cut out of everything if you keep this up. You're destroying your sister's future out of spite. I deleted them one by one, my pulse steady. Each word only confirmed how desperate they were. By mid-morning, Kristen called. They've already filed a counterclaim, she said, her tone crisp. They're arguing your grandfather's will was outdated, that his intent had changed in his final years. They're trying to drag this through the mud. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. Can they do that? They can try, she said. But the document is notarized and clear. This is intimidation. They're hoping to exhaust you. Exhaust me. That had been their playbook for years, pile on responsibility until I broke. Then call me selfish when I finally said no. Not this time. Kristen set up a meeting with a judge to enforce the will. I spent the afternoon gathering every scrap of evidence I had, bank transfers, repair receipts, photos of me, patching walls, even screenshots of texts where Mom had asked me to cover bills. When I laid them out on Kristen's office table, she looked at me like I just handed her ammunition for war. They'll have no ground left, she said. Still, the fight seeped into my daily life. Neighbors whispered, some avoiding me, others quietly showing support. Mrs. Linda left a note in my mailbox. Don't let them steal what's yours. Your grandfather loved you too much for that. But others weren't so kind. Mr. Rowland, from 2 doors down, an old friend of my father's, stopped me in the street. Monica, your parents gave their whole lives for you. How can you turn against them now? I bit my tongue, forcing myself not to spill every ugly truth. Let him believe what he wanted. People always chose the version of the story that made them most comfortable. At night, I lay awake in my apartment, my thoughts racing. I could still hear Tara's voice, echoing, Mom and Dad trusted me with this family, not you. The entitlement in those words kept me fueled. The first court session was brutal. My parents sat on the other side, Tara beside them, her expression smug. My mother dabbed fake tears with a tissue, while my father shook his head, like I'd betrayed him personally. Their lawyer tried to paint me as cold, ungrateful, a daughter who turned on her parents the moment she had leverage. I clenched my fists under the table, letting Kristen do the talking. Then Kristen slid my grandfather's will across to the judge, her voice calm but firm. This is his signature. This is his intent. Everything else is noise. The judge studied the document for what felt like an eternity before nodding. On its face, this is enforceable. I watched my mother's mask crack just for a second. Tara's jaw tightened. My father refused to look at me. Walking out of that courtroom, the air tasted different, like I'd finally stolen a piece of freedom back from them. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. Families like mine didn't surrender gracefully. They plotted, they guilted, they clawed until the last shred of power slipped from their hands. And I had to be ready for every trick they had left. The ruling wasn't even a week old before the smear campaign began. I walked into the local cafe one morning, hoping for 10 quiet minutes with my coffee, and felt the shift immediately. Conversation stopped. Eyes tracked me. Whispers rippled in my wake. By the time I reached the counter, the barista who'd known me since high school gave a strained smile. Rough week, huh? I didn't answer. But when I stepped outside, my phone buzzed with a notification, Tara's Facebook post. She'd written a long, syrupy paragraph about losing faith in family and how greed poisons even the closest bonds. Attached was a photo of her kids, my niece and nephew, looking small and sad on a couch. The caption read, "They don't deserve to lose their home because of someone else's bitterness." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, people consoling her, some calling me selfish outright. I wanted to throw my phone into the street. Instead, I locked the screen and kept walking. That evening, my parents left me a voicemail, my mother's voice carefully trembling. "We don't know how you sleep at night, Monica. You're tearing this family apart. Your grandfather would be ashamed." It was the same manipulation they'd always used, wrapping cruelty in sentiment. Kristen told me not to engage. "Don't give them ammunition," she said firmly. "The law is on your side. Let them flail." But the attacks weren't just online. At the grocery store, I overheard Mrs. Fletcher telling another neighbor I turned into a different person after I got money from my job. Someone else muttered, "Ungrateful brat," as I passed by. It wasn't just gossip. It was exile. At night, I lay awake in my new apartment, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I was becoming the villain they painted me as. But then I'd remember my grandfather's cracked hands guiding me through this house, his voice whispering, "This will always be yours." They couldn't rewrite that truth. The lowest point came when Tara sent me a message directly. Not the polished public post, but raw fury typed at 2 a.m. "You think you won, but you've ruined everything. Mom cries every night because of you. Dad says he doesn't have a daughter anymore. I hope you're happy sitting alone with your precious receipts while the rest of us suffer." I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the app. Because here's the thing, her words hurt. Even knowing they were lies, they pierced. A child doesn't stop wanting their parents' approval just because they never get it. But then another message arrived. This one from Mrs. Linda, the neighbor who'd always been kind. It was short, just 3 words, "Proud of you." And somehow, that mattered more. The backlash was real. It was ugly. But it also revealed something I'd never seen so clearly before: how far my family would go to preserve a lie, and how much I'd lost by clinging to their version of love. It was the beginning of a new kind of war. The storm finally broke on a Sunday evening. I had gone to visit Kristen, craving her calm energy, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a video. Someone had recorded my parents standing in front of the Burlington house, Tara, at their side, her kids clutching her legs. My mother was crying for the camera. We built this home for family, for our grandchildren. And now it's being stolen. The video was slick, almost staged. Within hours, it had thousands of shares in local groups. By the next morning, people I barely knew were messaging me things like, "How could you do this to your own blood?" Kristen scrolled through the comments, her jaw tight. They're weaponizing pity. They know optics matter more than facts. I felt sick. My chest burned with the same suffocating heat I'd felt that night at dinner when my mother slammed her fork and gave me 48 hours to vanish. That was the moment I realized they weren't going to stop. Not after losing in court. Not after the will. They would burn my name to ash if it meant saving face. So I made a choice. That night, I wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter sealed in an envelope addressed to my parents. In it, I laid out every sacrifice I'd made, covering the mortgage, repairing the house, carrying them through years when they could barely stand on their own. I reminded them of the will they'd hidden. And then I wrote the hardest words of my life. You are my family, but you will never treat me as yours. I cannot keep bleeding for people who only sharpen knives in return. From this day forward, I am done. I left the letter in their mailbox before dawn, when the streets were empty and no one could see me. Driving back, the world felt different. The sky was heavy with clouds, the lake dark and restless. My chest was hollow, but my hands were steady. Later that morning, Tara called. I didn't pick up. A voicemail came through anyway, her voice dripping with venom. "Coward, you can't even face us, don't think this is over." But it was over. At least for me. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my parents. One by one, I erased the connections that had chained me down for years. It felt brutal, like amputating a limb. But sometimes you cut away what's rotting before it poisons the whole body. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried harder than I had since the first dinner when they betrayed me. But this time, the tears weren't from confusion or shock. They were from release. I wasn't fighting them anymore. I wasn't begging to be seen. I had finally chosen myself. And though the backlash would rage on, the whispers in grocery stores would linger. I knew this was the breaking point, the moment I stopped living for their approval and started building a life without them. Silence has a weight all its own. In the weeks that followed my letter, my phone stopped buzzing. No more late-night calls, no more guilt-laden voicemails. For the first time in years, my life was quiet. But the quiet was not peace. It was a hollow echo, reminding me that family, the people I had once trusted most, now lived on the other side of a wall I had built myself. At first, I second-guessed everything. In the grocery store, I thought I saw my mother's face down the aisle, only to realize it was a stranger. Walking past the park, I caught myself remembering afternoons when my father pushed me on the swing as a little girl. Those memories pressed against the present, like bruises I couldn't stop touching. But then came the slow shift. I started decorating my apartment not with the heavy furniture from the old house, but with things that reflected me. A secondhand bookshelf filled with novels I'd never had time to read. A plant in the corner that stubbornly sprouted new leaves. A set of mugs that matched nothing but made me smile. Kristen came over, often her presence grounding. "You're rebuilding," she said one evening as we unpacked a box of kitchenware I'd bought on sale. "And this time, it's yours, not theirs, just yours." Work became another anchor. At my marketing firm, I poured myself into projects with a focus I hadn't felt in years. My boss noticed. Clients noticed. One even pulled me aside after a presentation and said, "You carry yourself like someone who knows where they belong." The words hit me harder than he knew. Meanwhile, word spread about my family. Burlington is small, and secrets rarely stay buried. Neighbors who had once pitied my parents began to whisper about the truth, the will, the money I'd poured in the years I carried the house alone. Mrs. Linda, the neighbor who'd once brought cookies, saw me outside one day and said softly, "People are starting to understand, dear. Truth has a way of surfacing." I nodded grateful, but I didn't crave vindication anymore. What mattered wasn't whether people saw me as the villain or the victim. What mattered was that I finally knew the truth, and I was done letting anyone twist it. As for my parents and Tara, I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. They were struggling in their rental house, their finances tight. Tara had tried to buy a home in California, but had been forced into a mortgage that stretched her thin. My parents, once proud, now lived under a cloud of quiet shame in a community that no longer saw them as the wronged ones. And me, I was moving forward. I joined a local hiking group, rediscovering the joy of long trails and fresh air. On weekends, I drove out to the lake sipping coffee as the water shimmered under the sunrise. These small rituals stitched together a life that finally felt like mine, not borrowed, not burdened, not tied to the strings of people who tried to cut me loose. One night, sitting on my balcony with the city lights flickering below, I thought about that first dinner, the clang of my mother's fork, the silence of my father, the cold entitlement in Tara's eyes. I remembered the way I'd felt then, small, crushed, erased. Now I whispered to myself, never again. I wasn't the same Monica who had begged for scraps of approval, who had carried her family's weight like a penance. I was someone new, Someone scarred, yes, but stronger for it? Ask yourself, what would you do if the people you loved most decided you were disposable? Would you stay and keep bleeding, or would you walk away even if it meant walking into loneliness? I made my choice. And though it hurt, though it cost me more than I ever imagined, I know now it was the only way to save myself. The seasons turned, and with them, so did I. By spring, the weight that had once felt unbearable had become something else, a scar I carried, but no longer a wound that bled every day. My mornings began with light streaming through my small apartment windows, coffee in hand, a notebook open for ideas that weren't about fixing anyone else's problems, just mine. I poured myself into work, not because I had to prove anything, but because it felt good to be building something that belonged only to me. My projects flourished. A promotion followed. My boss told me, "You found your voice." I smiled, knowing it was true not just in the office, but in my life. Outside of work, I created new rituals. Sunday hikes with my group where the crunch of leaves underfoot replaced the sound of slammed doors and sharp words. Evenings curled up with books I'd neglected for years. Sometimes I cooked a recipe my mother had once taught me, and instead of bitterness, I let myself taste the warmth of those memories, taking what was good and leaving the rest behind. My parents and Tara faded into the background of my life, like old photographs left too long in the sun. I heard updates through neighbors now and then, financial struggles, whispers of arguments. The house they'd tried to steal from me, now gone forever. Each rumor no longer stabbed it, passed over me like wind on a mountain. And yet sometimes, in quiet moments, I felt the ache of absence. Family is not easily replaced, even when it has betrayed you. There were nights I caught myself wondering if my mother thought of me before bed, if my father regretted his silence, if Tara ever replayed her words and felt even a flicker of shame. But those thoughts no longer define me. They passed, and I remain. One late evening, I walked by the lake where the water reflected a sky streaked with fading pink. I thought of my grandfather, of the promise he'd whispered years ago. This place will always be yours. He hadn't just meant the house. I understood that now. He'd meant strength, resilience, the ability to claim my own space in the world, no matter who tried to strip it away. That night, I lit a candle by my window. Not for them, for me. For the girl who once painted walls and fixed floorboards believing love would be enough. For the woman who finally understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. The story isn't neat. There was no apology that healed everything. No tearful reunion that tied the broken pieces back together. And maybe that's the point, because real life is messy. Sometimes the people you trust most betray you. Sometimes you give everything and are left with nothing. And sometimes the only way to survive is to choose yourself, even if it means standing alone. So I'll leave you with this. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you? Would you keep fighting to belong to them, or would you finally belong to yourself? The choice is never easy, but it is always yours. Thanks for staying with me through this story. More shocking, full stories are on the way, and I'll see you in the next one.